Columbus, the navigator who changed the world, reading and published by Mr. Books. The Age of Exploration, spanning from the late 15th to the early 17th century, marks a pivotal chapter in human history. This period, characterized by daring voyages and quests for new lands, was not just about territorial expansion, but also a profound exchange of cultures, ideas, and resources that would forever change the world. At the heart of this remarkable era stands Christopher Columbus, a figure simultaneously celebrated and vilified for his role in what many consider one of the most consequential navigational feats of all time. Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy, in 1451, during a time when Europe was ripe for exploration. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 curtailed traditional trade routes and spurred European nations to seek new pathways to the east. Columbus, fueled by dreams of wealth and the desire to spread Christianity, proposed a daring plan to sail westward across the Atlantic Ocean to reach Asia. His vision perplexed many in an age dominated by the prevailing belief that the oceans were far larger and more perilous than they are. In 1492, after years of petitioning the Spanish monarchy for support, Columbus finally obtained the backing he needed. He set sail with 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, embarking on a journey that would alter the course of history. Instead of Asia, Columbus encountered the islands of the Caribbean, claiming these newfound lands for Spain. This act of discovery initiated a transatlantic exchange that would result in profound impacts on both the Old and New Worlds. However, the legacy of Columbus is fraught with complexities. His encounters with indigenous peoples sparked a wave of colonization that would lead to significant cultural upheaval, loss of life, and dramatic shifts in the social fabric of the Americas. Today, discussions surrounding Columbus's voyages elicit a spectrum of opinions, categorizing him either as a brilliant navigator who expanded the horizons of the known world or as a harbinger of destruction who perpetuated colonialism. As we delve into the life and journeys of Christopher Columbus, we will explore not only the historical context of his explorations, but also the varied interpretations of his impact on world history. The chapters that follow will provide a comprehensive examination of Columbus's early life, his audacious plans, the myriad of encounters he had, and the lasting legacy of his voyages. We will critically analyze his role as a navigator amidst the challenges and triumphs he faced, and investigate the cultural transformations stemming from his expeditions. Ultimately, we will confront the enduring question: how should we view Columbus today, hero or villain? Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1: The Early Life of Columbus. Christopher Columbus was born in 1451 in Genoa, a bustling maritime republic in what is now Italy. Growing up in a seafaring town, he was exposed to the rigorous maritime culture that defined the region. This environment instilled in him a fascination with the sea and exploration at an early age. Columbus was the son of a wool weaver, and while his family was not wealthy, they provided him with a basic education. He learned reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography, laying the groundwork for his later pursuits. In his teenage years, Columbus began to travel. By the age of 14, he was sailing on trading ships throughout the Mediterranean. His early voyages would have certainly influenced his understanding of navigation and seamanship. Columbus eventually settled in Portugal, where he met influential navigators and cartographers who further fueled his desire to explore. The Portuguese were at the forefront of maritime exploration during this period, having established a series of lucrative trade routes along the African coast and into the Atlantic. Columbus was significantly influenced by the works of notable scholars and explorers of his time, particularly those who suggested a westward route to Asia. He read extensively about the travels of Marco Polo and the geographical theories of Ptolemy. Captivated by the prospect of riches and eager to bring Christianity to the heathens of the East, Columbus formulated his own plan, advocating for a transatlantic voyage to reach Asia by sailing west. His proposal, however, was met with skepticism. The prevailing European beliefs underestimated the vastness of the ocean and overestimated the size of Asia, leading many to view Columbus's ambitions as unrealistic. Nevertheless, Columbus remained undeterred. He sought patronage from various European monarchs, but it wasn't until he approached King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain that his vision gained traction. In 1486, Columbus secured a meeting with the Spanish monarchs at their court in Córdoba. Presenting his plan for westward exploration, he sought to obtain ships and crew to undertake the voyage. The Spanish royals were initially hesitant, still recovering from the Reconquista, a campaign that culminated in 1492 with the fall of Granada. They were skeptical, but intrigued, as they recognized the potential for new wealth and resources, given the ongoing competition for trade dominance with Portugal. After years of persistence, and with the promise of titles and a share of the profits from the newly discovered lands, Columbus finally received royal support. The terms of his agreement were formally outlined, and he was appointed Admiral of the Ocean Sea and Governor of any lands he might discover. Set against the backdrop of political consolidation in Spain, Columbus's voyages would soon begin a transformation not only for the Americas, but also for Europe. However, it is critical to acknowledge that Columbus's early life was marked by a relentless pursuit of ambition, shaped by his environment and experiences. His maritime journey would soon set the stage for one of history's most significant turning points, blurring the lines between discovery and devastation. Chapter 2: The Visionary Voyage. On August 3, 1492, Christopher Columbus embarked on his renowned voyage that would lead him across the Atlantic. He commenced his journey from the port of Palos de la Frontera, commanding a fleet of 3 ships, the Navigator, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Each vessel played a pivotal role, not only in Columbus's mission, but in establishing Spain's enduring legacy in the New World. The Santa Maria was the largest and served as Columbus's flagship, while the Navigator and Pinta were smaller caravels, capable of navigating the treacherous waters of the Atlantic. Columbus meticulously organized his expedition, equipping his ships with ample supplies, navigational tools, and a carefully selected crew of approximately 90 men. The voyage was fueled not only by ambition, but also a deep-seated desire for redemption and validation, particularly after years of being overlooked and dismissed by other European powers. As the fleet sailed from port, the hopes and expectations surrounding Columbus's expedition were tremendous. The promise of discovering a direct trade route to Asia represented not merely an economic opportunity, but a chance to assert Spain's dominance over rival powers. In a time characterized by a fervent quest for wealth and glory, Columbus became emblematic of the spirit of exploration that defined the era. Days at sea turned into weeks, and as the crew navigated the open ocean, they faced numerous challenges. Provisions began to dwindle, and morale dipped among the sailors. The uncertainties of the journey, combined with the vastness of the Atlantic, created a growing sense of anxiety. Columbus, however, remained steadfast in his conviction, persuading the crew that success was within reach. He relied on faulty charts and theoretical calculations, which, despite their inaccuracy, provided hope that they were heading in the right direction. After a grueling 33 days at sea, the fleet finally sighted land on October 12, 1492. Columbus and his men had arrived at what is now known as the Bahamas, although Columbus believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, referring to the island as San Salvador. The initial encounters with the indigenous Taino people were marked by curiosity and mutual wonder. Columbus noted their gentle demeanor and hospitable nature, describing them as generous and welcoming. His journals from this period reflect an awe at the lush landscapes and the potential for wealth as he spotted the golden ornaments worn by some of the locals. Columbus quickly set about claiming the territory for Spain, raised the royal standards, and embarked on a series of explorations throughout the Caribbean. His subsequent voyages took him to the islands of Cuba and Hispaniola, where he encountered a rich tapestry of cultures. Columbus's accounts from these early interactions reveal his fascination with the native populations, whom he viewed through a lens of European superiority. He noted their simplicity, their lack of formal governance, and their traditions, often misinterpreting their way of life in a manner that would justify future colonization. His navigation was largely guided by celestial bodies and the rudimentary navigational tools available, such as the compass and cross-staff. Columbus's ability to chart a course through uncharted waters was aided by his intuitive understanding of wind patterns and ocean currents. The skill and bravery exhibited by Columbus and his crew solidified their historical legacy, even as the darker aspects of their endeavors would later emerge. As Columbus returned to Spain in March 1493, he celebrated his success and was hailed as a hero. The news of his discovery ignited a wave of enthusiasm and ambition across Europe. The monarchs of Spain were eager to expand their influence, leading to a series of further expeditions that would ultimately result in the permanent European presence in the Americas. Columbus' voyages reshaped the world map, sparking the age of colonization and the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures unlike anything seen before. However, it is crucial to recognize that this initial triumph would soon become overshadowed by the subsequent impacts of European colonization. As Columbus continued his expeditions, his actions would precipitate significant cultural and demographic changes that would alter the course of history. Chapter 3: Encounters and Controversies. Columbus's voyages to the New World were not merely explorations. They were encounters fraught with profound implications. The initial interactions between Columbus and the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean were characterized by both wonder and misunderstanding. Columbus viewed these new lands as opportunities for economic gain and glory for Spain, while the native populations experienced these incursions as disruptive and, at times, violent. During his first voyage, Columbus encountered the Taino people, who inhabited many of the islands he explored. His descriptions of the Taino reflect a blend of admiration and condescension. He noted their physical beauty and hospitality, often portraying them as innocent souls in need of European guidance and conversion. Yet, despite his claims of goodwill, Columbus's expectations to exploit the land and its resources were clear. He envisioned the establishment of a trade network, fueled by the riches he believed lay within the islands. Despite Columbus's initial claims of discovery, the arrival of Europeans in the Americas altered the lives of the indigenous populations irrevocably. After Columbus left the Caribbean to return to Spain, he left behind a small contingent of men to establish a settlement on Hispaniola. This decision set off a series of conflicts as the newcomers imposed their will upon the land. The European arrival heralded an era of exploitation, as the demands for gold and labor led to the subjugation of the Taino. This exploitation culminated in the encomienda system, in which Spanish colonists were entrusted with the labor of local populations. Instead of fostering mutual respect and friendship, the actions of Columbus and his men revealed darker motivations. Initially intending to form alliances and trade, Columbus resorted to violence against the Taino, who resisted the invasion of their lands and way of life. The tensions that emerged would spark a cycle of conflict as European demands for resources intensified. Columbus's second voyage in 1493 was marked by a thirst for wealth and a determination to bring the riches of the New World back to Spain. He returned with a larger fleet, consisting of 17 ships and over 1,000 men, determined to capitalize on his initial successes. The encounters he facilitated during this period were not characterized by cooperation. Rather, they often devolved into vicious confrontations. Columbus's actions reflected the imperial mindset of European colonization, viewing the native peoples less as partners and more as obstacles in the quest for wealth. The controversies surrounding Columbus extend beyond these two encounters. His leadership style elicited criticism from both his contemporaries and posterity. Observers criticized his harsh treatment of the natives, including acts of violence and slavery, which led to a rapid decline in the native population due to both direct violence and the diseases introduced by Europeans. Smallpox, influenza, and other illnesses decimated communities unprepared for such outbreaks, resulting in catastrophic losses that reverberated through the indigenous societies. As criticism mounted during his governorship of the new territories, Columbus faced opposition from other Spanish officials, some of whom were horrified by the reports of atrocities against the indigenous populations. The moral implications of his actions began to reign in Europe as increasing numbers of clerical voices, such as Bartolomé de las Casas, began to assert the rights of the indigenous peoples. These voices raised ethical questions around colonization, framing Columbus's actions in a more critical light. While Columbus's expeditions opened the Americas to European exploration and settlement, they also sparked debates about the morality of his actions, complicating the legacy he left behind. The multifaceted nature of Columbus's encounters, marked by awe, misunderstanding, exploitation, and violence, illustrates the profound complexities inherent in these early contacts between two vastly different worlds. As we examine the consequences of Columbus's ventures, it becomes clear that his voyages were indeed a double-edged sword. They brought known world knowledge of uncharted territories, yet they initiated a tragic chapter in the history of the Americas that would lead to centuries of colonization and conflict. Chapter 4. The Legacy of Discovery. The legacy of Christopher Columbus and his voyages is both monumental and contentious. His expeditions not only charted new territories, but also unleashed a series of events that reshaped global economics, cultures, and societal structures. As the first European to make extensive contact with the Americas, Columbus became a pivotal figure in what is known as the Columbian Exchange, an unprecedented transfer of plants, animals, cultural practices, and technology between the Old World and the New World. Upon returning to Spain, the tales of Columbus's discoveries spurred an era of exploration and exploitation, fueled by greed and ambition. The news of his findings ignited a wave of interest among other European powers, leading to numerous voyages of exploration and colonization throughout the Americas. Countries like Spain, Portugal, France, and England scrambled to stake their claims in the New World. This competition for dominance fueled not only territorial ambitions, but also fierce rivalries that would shape international relations for centuries to come. Columbus's impact can be seen in the economic transformations that followed his discoveries. The influx of gold, silver, and other resources from the Americas shifted the economic power dynamics in Europe, initiating what would later be referred to as the Commercial Revolution. The wealth derived from these newly acquired resources funded further explorations, increased trade, and enhanced the rise of merchant classes across Europe. Colonization transformed European economies, leading to increased production and trade, and ultimately to the integration of the world economy. However, Columbus's legacy is deeply intertwined with the subject of colonization and its destructive consequences. The arrival of Europeans resulted in significant cultural disruptions throughout the Americas. Indigenous populations faced not only physical displacement and violence, but also the imposition of foreign beliefs, languages, and governance structures. The colonizers often viewed the native cultures as primitive, perpetuating a narrative that justified their conquests and exploitation. The introduction of European agricultural practices and livestock transformed the landscape of the Americas. Cash crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton became the backbone of colonial economies, cultivated primarily through the forced labor of enslaved individuals. This shift towards plantation agriculture marked the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, with profound implications not only for the Americas but also for Africa, where countless individuals were enslaved and subjected to brutal conditions. Columbus's journeys also initiated a cultural exchange that was both beneficial and detrimental. While European goods and ideas permeated the Americas, indigenous knowledge and traditions were often disregarded. The amalgamation of cultures created new identities and hybrid cultures, but it also resulted in the marginalization and oppression of native populations. In contemporary discussions of Columbus's legacy, there is a growing acknowledgement of the need to re-evaluate historical narratives. The characterization of Columbus as a hero is increasingly contested in light of the brutal realities of his expeditions. Critics argue that celebrating Columbus without recognizing the human suffering and cultural devastation inflicted upon indigenous peoples perpetuates a problematic and incomplete understanding of history. Today, scholars, activists, and indigenous leaders advocate for a more nuanced approach to Columbus's legacy, one that recognizes the dualities of exploration and exploitation. The push to re-examine these historical perspectives calls for a reconciliation between the narratives of discovery and the realities of colonial violence. Institutions across the Americas are beginning to adopt more inclusive curricula that account for the voices of those who suffered as a result of colonization, ensuring that the histories of indigenous peoples are not overshadowed by dominant narratives. In conclusion, while Columbus's voyages undeniably marked the beginning of an age of exploration, his legacy is multifaceted and fraught with contradiction. His expeditions opened up new worlds and established global interconnections that continue to shape our societies today. However, the cultural disruptions, socio-economic transformations, and human tragedies that followed challenge us to critically engage with this complex historical figure and to honor the legacies of those who were marginalized in the process. Chapter 5: Navigating Challenges and Triumphs. As Columbus embarked on his expeditions, he faced an array of challenges and triumphs that would define his journey and shape the course of world history. Each voyage brought its own set of obstacles, ranging from natural elements to human conflicts, revealing the complexities of early exploration during the Age of Discovery. Columbus's ability to navigate these challenges demonstrates not only his seafaring skills, but also his resilience and determination as he sought to achieve his ambitious goals. One of the most significant challenges Columbus faced was the vastness and unpredictability of the Atlantic Ocean. The early voyages were fraught with fears of uncharted waters, storms, and the potential for shipwrecks. Columbus relied on a combination of navigational tools, ship logs, and the experience of his crew to steer through the treacherous waters. The uncertainty of the journey led to growing tensions within the crew, who were often anxious about their long-term prospects at sea. To maintain morale, Columbus employed various strategies, including regular updates on their progress, promises of rewards, and appeals to the crew's sense of duty to the Spanish crowns. Moreover, Columbus contended with the limitations of navigation technology of the era. The ships of his time were equipped only with rudimentary tools like compasses, astrolabes, and cross-staffs, which limited their accuracy. Columbus had to depend heavily on celestial navigation to guide his course, which was often hampered by inclement weather. This reliance on celestial bodies underscored his deep understanding of the ocean's rhythms. However, it also highlighted the vulnerability of his ships amidst the vast expanse of water. The confluence of these factors made each voyage a precarious undertaking. Columbus's ventures were also marked by a profound degree of triumph and success. Upon arriving in the New World, he achieved a monumental feat of navigation and discovery that would catapult him into the annals of history. His journeys opened the door to the Americas for subsequent explorers, significantly altering global trade and contact. After his first landing in the Bahamas, Columbus continued to explore different islands, navigating further southward to Cuba and Hispaniola. His discovery of these new lands heralded a new era of European exploration and colonization. In addition to the geographical discoveries, verbal accounts of Columbus's expeditions catalyzed a wave of interest and ambition in Europe. Upon his return to Spain, the news of his triumph was greeted with enthusiasm and wonder. The Spanish monarchy, keenly aware of the geopolitical and economic ramifications of Columbus's discoveries, recognized the profound potential for wealth from new sources. They encouraged additional voyages, leading others to follow in Columbus's wake. However, amidst these triumphs lay challenges that arose from the consequences of colonialism. The indigenous populations faced enormous disruptions as European fleets arrived. Columbus's initial interactions with the Taino were marked by curiosity and exchange. But these contacts rapidly evolved into demands for tribute and forced labor. The establishment of settlements laid the groundwork for varying degrees of cooperation and resistance, but negative consequences ensued as the imposition of European customs and exploitation led to violence and despair. Among these challenges were the diseases brought by European sailors, which decimated indigenous populations with stunning rapidity. Smallpox, which had no counterpart in the Americas, wreaked havoc on native peoples who lacked immunity. The result was a catastrophic loss of life that would forever alter the demographic landscape. Columbus himself recognized the potential for economic gain, but failed to understand or address the profound human costs of his endeavors. The triumph of discovery thus came at an immeasurable cost to the indigenous peoples. Columbus faced significant challenges as he attempted to govern the newfound colonies. After his initial voyages, he was appointed governor of these territories, but his leadership was contested. Witnesses reported abuses of power and mismanagement, which included violent confrontations with the indigenous inhabitants and poor treatment of his crew. This instability overshadowed some of his accomplishments in exploration. Eventually, criticism of his rule reached the Spanish courts, leading to his eventual arrest and return to Spain in chains, where he faced accusations of mismanagement. In conclusion, Columbus's legacy is a tapestry woven with both challenges and triumphs. His remarkable navigational feats and discoveries paved the way for an era of exploration that would change the trajectory of world history. Yet, it is crucial to recognize the darker aspects of his legacy: the violence inflicted on indigenous populations, the onset of disease, and the complexities of colonial governance. The dual nature of Columbus's journey serves as a testament to the complexities of exploration, underscoring the ongoing dialogue regarding historical narratives in the face of significant cultural impact. Chapter 6: The Cultural Impact of Columbus's Journeys. Christopher Columbus's voyages had far-reaching cultural implications that extend beyond mere exploration. They catalyzed various social, economic, and cultural transformations both in the Old World and the New World. The events that unfolded following his expeditions would set the stage for centuries of interaction that reshaped cultures globally. One of the most significant impacts of Columbus's journeys was the initiation of cultural exchanges between Europe and the Americas, a phenomenon often referred to as the Columbian Exchange. This exchange was not limited to the transfer of goods, but also spanned ideas, technologies, and traditions. From the Americas, Europe received an influx of new agricultural products, including potatoes, tomatoes, maize, and tobacco. These crops would revolutionize European diets and farming practices, becoming staples and significantly enhancing food security across the continent. Conversely, the exchange was not unilateral. The introduction of European crops and livestock to the Americas transformed the landscape and agricultural practices of indigenous societies. Wheat, cattle, and horses were among some of the animals and crops that arrived with the European settlers, drastically altering the way of life for many Native American tribes. This change, however, was not without its consequences. It often led to the marginalization and displacement of indigenous cultures as European settlers expanded their territories. Furthermore, Columbus's expeditions ignited a wave of missionary activities, primarily spearheaded by the Catholic Church, which sought to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity. This religious zeal underpinned many subsequent European explorations and colonial endeavors. Missionaries established missions, which became focal points of cultural interaction and conflict. They not only aimed to spread Christianity, but often imposed European cultural norms and values upon native populations, leading to significant cultural erosion and the suppression of indigenous beliefs and practices. Columbus's influence also permeated art and literature. His voyages inspired a plethora of works that romanticized exploration and adventure. Renaissance artists depicted his journeys in visual art, illustrating the drama and beauty of the unknown world. Literature of the period often featured themes of discovery and conquest, reflecting the zeitgeist of a Europe emboldened by new knowledge and prospects. However, the cultural impact of Columbus's journeys was not solely an exchange of ideas and products. It also bore witness to violence and exploitation. As European powers claimed dominion over new territories, they imposed systems of governance that often marginalized indigenous populations. The arrival of European diseases, to which native peoples had no immunity, led to decimating epidemics, further entrenching European control and altering social dynamics irreversibly. In contemporary discourse, the re-evaluation of Columbus's contributions cannot overlook the profound suffering of indigenous populations. The cultural impacts of his voyages continue to be felt as modern societies grapple with the legacies of colonialism. While some celebrate Columbus as a pioneer of the age of exploration, many advocate for a deeper understanding of the consequences of his actions, seeking recognition for the cultures that were irrevocably changed or erased. In conclusion, the cultural impact of Columbus's journeys can be viewed through a dual lens, one that acknowledges the exchange of goods and ideas that enriched European societies, and another that reflects on the profound and often devastating effects on indigenous cultures. This complexity requires a nuanced understanding of Columbus, not only as a navigator and explorer, but also as a pivotal figure in a broader narrative of encounter, conflict, and transformation. Chapter 7. Re-evaluating Columbus, Hero or Villain? The figure of Christopher Columbus occupies a complex position in history, eliciting deep admiration and fervent criticism. For centuries, he was celebrated as a quintessential hero, an intrepid explorer who bravely sailed into the unknown, representing the spirit of discovery that characterized the age of exploration. However, contemporary scholarship has increasingly challenged this glorified portrayal, complicating the narratives surrounding Columbus and prompting a critical re-evaluation of his legacy. To classify Columbus as a hero requires acknowledging the context in which his actions were celebrated. His voyages led to the European awareness of the Americas and opened the floodgates for further exploration and colonization. Proponents of Columbus view his expeditions as pioneering endeavors that expanded the horizons of human knowledge and maritime navigation. His navigational skills and determination are often framed as remarkable feats that should inspire future generations. Yet, this romanticized image neglects the darker facets of Columbus's endeavors. The arrival of Columbus in the Americas heralded the onset of European colonization, a process fraught with violence, exploitation, and profound suffering. Indigenous populations faced not only subjugation, but also the devastating impacts of introduced diseases that decimated communities and obliterated cultures. Many scholars assert that Columbus's view of the New World was one of conquest and domination, as he engaged in acts of violence against native peoples, leading to long-term repercussions that persist to this day. Critics argue that elevating Columbus to the status of a hero mythologizes colonialism and perpetuates a narrative that glosses over the brutal realities faced by indigenous populations. This historical amnesia has inspired movements to recontextualize Columbus Day, calling for its recognition as Indigenous Peoples Day to honor and acknowledge the sacrifices endured by native communities due to European expansion. Furthermore, the re-evaluation of Columbus also scrutinizes the implications of his legacy in contemporary society. Discussions surrounding topics of colonialism, race, and identity remain potent as the ramifications of Columbus's explorations continue to resonate. The complexities of his actions compel us to confront uncomfortable truths regarding cultural domination and the enduring injustices faced by indigenous communities. This critical lens fosters richer historical discourse, encouraging us to reflect on who we choose to celebrate and why. Columbus serves as a case study in the challenges of historical interpretation, illustrating how collective memory is shaped by prevailing ideologies and societal values. The dual nature of Columbus's legacy, both as a navigator who changed the course of history and as an individual whose actions willfully contributed to suffering, demands a nuanced understanding. In closing, re-evaluating Columbus as either a hero or a villain is not a straightforward binary. Rather, it is a complex inquiry that requires grappling with the multifaceted consequences of his voyages. Embracing this complexity invites a more inclusive dialogue that honors the diverse perspectives of all peoples impacted by Columbus's journeys, allowing for a richer, more comprehensive narrative that acknowledges both the triumphs of exploration and the painful legacies of colonization. As we reflect on Columbus's life and legacy, it becomes increasingly clear that the stories we tell shape our understanding of history and, ultimately, our collective identity. Conclusion. In conclusion, the legacy of Christopher Columbus is a tapestry woven from threads of ambition, discovery, and controversy. While celebrated as a pioneering navigator who opened new continents to European exploration, his journeys also ushered in a period of colonization that brought devastation to indigenous populations. Examining Columbus's life and voyages reveals a complex individual whose actions resonate through history, prompting ongoing debates about heroism, imperialism, and the consequences of cultural encounters. Through his early life, as a determined mariner, Columbus evolved into a visionary whose ambition drove him across the Atlantic. His encounters with the New World were marked by both remarkable discoveries and profound moral dilemmas, forever altering the course of history. The repercussions of his explorations are felt even today as we reassess his impact on the cultures and peoples of the Americas. The cultural implications of Columbus's voyages extend beyond mere geography. They invite critical reflection on identity, history, and the narratives we construct around exploration. As we confront these multifaceted outcomes, we gain the opportunity to rewrite the narratives of the past. Columbus's legacy is not only about the lands he discovered, but also about how we choose to interpret that discovery today, an act of remembering that shapes our future. In reassessing Columbus as both a hero and a villain, we can understand the moral complexities of exploration and its far-reaching consequences. This re-evaluation calls for a nuanced understanding of history, one that honors the diverse perspectives of those who lived through the era of discovery. By confronting these complexities, we nurture a richer, more comprehensive view of our past, ultimately paving the way for more informed discussions on identity, justice, and the shared human experience. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Your support means the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.